Welcome, everyone, to this month's episode of ZOLEO Campfire Chats. We're so glad that you're here. Whether you're brand new to the outdoors or you have years of experience under your belt, this is a space to share ideas, learn from experts, and connect with a like-minded community. I'm Sammy from ZOLEO, and I'll be your host for today. Before we hop into the conversation, I want to quickly cover a few housekeeping notes so everyone has a great experience. So, house note number one, your comfort comes first. This is a cozy campfire chat. So this is a place to relax and be yourself and enjoy some great conversation. Note number two is that if you like to jump in with a question or comment, just pop it into the Q&A box in the top ribbon. We'll do our best to bring as many of your questions into the conversation as possible. During the session, guest cameras and mics will stay off so everyone can sit back and enjoy the session without distractions. Note number three, we have a few awesome folks here from ZOLEO that are joining us today. So first, I'd like to introduce Lou. Lou is our product expert. He'll be addressing any ZOLEO related and product related questions. And next we have Lauren. Lauren is our moderator and she'll be managing the Q&A box live during the session. She will also be keeping an eye on your questions and will be running the Q&A segment later on. And finally, just a friendly reminder, let's keep everything kind and respectful. We want this to be a positive space where everyone feels welcome to connect and share. Now let's give it up for today's guest. Andrew Skurka is a professional adventurer, guide, and educator. He's been named Adventurer of the Year by both National Geographic and Outside, and he's pioneered some of the most iconic high routes in North America. Now he runs the highly respected guide service focused on thoughtful planning, efficient systems, and sound decision-making in the backcountry. Give it up for Andrew Skurka.
Hi, Sammy.
Hey, Andrew, how's it going?
We're doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, we're so excited to have you here. So, Andrew, you've been named Adventurer of the Year by National Geographic and Outside, and you've pioneered some iconic high routes and built a successful guide service. So, looking back at all of this, what experience has changed most about how you think about planning trips?
Yeah, it's funny, those accolades. So I'm now 44. Those accolades I'll have when I was in my 20s. Let's look back at those years. I'm like, wow, is that the same person? So the big difference for me with planning trips has just been the level of precision that I can do now versus when early on. And part of that is just skill, that I've planned many more trips at this point in my life than I did when I was in my 20s. And the other part of it is just having access to the information that we have now. So like as an example, early on in my trips, I didn't have a good way of informing gear decisions. And I was like, how do you know what clothing to wear in Colorado in July versus Colorado in September? And I didn't even know what I should be looking at. And then, but since early on, that was 2003 when I first came out to Colorado. Since then, now there's this abundance of information, like temperature and precipitation data that you can get online in 30 seconds, and that would inform those sorts of decisions. So I would say overall, for me, the big difference has been having a very structured planning process. I think you could kind of boil it down to 7 steps, and just over time having gotten much better at the entire process. Would you actually like to hear what your audience, you think probably we should go into those 7 steps?
Well, yeah, I'm really curious about these 7 steps.
Yeah. So the thing to know about when you're planning a trip, I'm going to present it as 7 steps, but it's more of a living, breathing process. So sometimes you might go along in these steps and you get to step 4 and you discover something that forces you to have to go back to step 2, okay, and kind of redo things. So the first step is just defining parameters, and this would be where, when, why, and the why being what is your trip objective. And for a backpacking trip, it's easiest to think about it in terms of how much hiking you plan to do versus how much camping, because that sort of informs whether you can pack a lot of stuff or whether you need to be very diligent about the things that you pack. And then other things you want to be considering are how long is the trip? What trails, routes, landmarks, campsites might you use? Who else is going to join you, or is this going to be a solo trip? You should be looking at things like permits, logistics, and then any like pertinent land use regulations. So like, can I have campfires, or are there like limits to how long I can be at a particular campsite for? Are there group size limits for a particular campsite? So that's the first step, just like defining some of those parameters, and that just kind of helps you like put your trip in a box. Like, okay, here's kind of what I'm working with. Second step is that you should take some time to research the conditions that you will likely encounter. So you're looking at temperature and precipitation, how much daylight, what kind of footing, vegetation, whether they're good navigational aids or whether they're like non-existent, how much sun exposure you'll have, water availability, wildlife and insects, how remote the area is, and then finally natural hazards. So you're doing research on all of this. So for example, like to figure out daylight, there's a great website. It's called Time and Date, and you can like figure out for a particular day at a particular location how much daylight you might have, and that affects like, if you're going to be, if at this time of the year, it's still beginning of February, you're going to be spending a lot of time in your shelter, whereas come July or late June, there's a lot more time to be outside.
Yeah.
Third step is selecting your gear, and all of your gear decisions should be driven by what you discovered when you were researching conditions. So, for example, if your research revealed that mosquitoes are horrible where you'll be in July, well, then your clothing should probably be like more bug proof, right?
I
Or
hate
if you,
mosquitoes.
I think most of them do. Although I will say, like I've hiked in some, I've seen some horrible mosquitoes, but they're much more manageable if you go in well prepared for them. So like the
Absolutely.
secret for anyone who's, I know ZOLEO is a Canadian company, so you guys have your fair share of bugs up there, but the secret for mosquitoes in particular is permethrin treated clothing, and it's much better off if you can get it factory treated. So like if you look for a product branded with like insect shield or something equivalent to that, that's gonna be, it does wonders.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. So you select all your gear, and then it's time to plan your food. And this is an area where we see a lot of people like um, they pack their fears. So like if people are afraid of being cold at night, they pack like a sleeping bag that's way too warm. If they're afraid of bears coming into their camp, then they like absolutely have to be in a tent because bears can't get through nylon. And then the same thing happens with food. If someone's afraid about being hungry, then they just end up packing way too much food. So a good like range, like a good range that you could easily follow. I don't know what the gram equivalent would be, but 18 to 22 ounces of food per person per day seems to be like what we have found to be about right for most people. You can go towards like the bottom end of that range if you are petite, older, and on a trip that isn't that intense, and then go up in that range if you're more muscular, out for a longer period of time, on a really intense trip, young. Okay, so that's fourth step is food. Fifth step would be creating or collecting all of your navigational resources. So this would be, I'm still old school, so I still use a lot of like paper maps. Still love paper maps.
Hey, we
Can't
love paper
can't
maps.
imagine going backpacking without paper maps. But for some people, it's just going to be a matter of downloading an app. Ooh. Um, Sixth step is gaining the requisite fitness and skills. So just making sure that you have what it takes to do your route. Like, can you do the mileage? Can you do the vertical? If you're going to the desert, do you know how to manage water? If you are going into grizzly bear country, do you know how to properly carry bear spray and what to do if you like, depending on like different grizzly bear encounters? And then the final step I think, to planning a good backpacking trip is just to go do a little rust buster, like a little gear check. Go spend the night in your backyard. Go for like just a day hike with all of your gear at your local park. Just kind of get used to your stuff and know how to use it. And that way, when you get out there, when it matters, you're a little bit more dialed in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a comprehensive look into planning everything, even down to weighing your food. I never thought
Yeah.
that about weighing your food. That's so important.
What do you do? You just put it in a bag and call it good?
But to be fair, I guess I fit into the category where I don't have to bring that much food, but I would imagine some people have to bring a bit more food.
Yeah.
So with this sort of planning and with this sort of thinking, what do you think are like the biggest non-negotiables that you have to lock in first as you're thinking about this? Are things that you have to plan for first as you begin this whole process? Do you have a checklist, or how does that look like?
Yeah, I do have a couple of, there are a couple of documents that I use that are really helpful. So the first one that I use is it's a trip planner document. Your viewers can actually, like, they can get onto my website and they can download a template of it. But it basically just helps you lay out your trip. It's all of that, like where I'm going, what the permit situation is, how I'm going to get to the trailhead, who I'm going with, what route I'm taking. It's just sort of like a plan. Because I think if
Yeah.
if you don't kind of have that plan, it's difficult to make any other decisions. For example, if you don't know how long you're going to be out for, is it going to be 5 days or is it going to be 7 days? Because that is a big difference with like how much food you're going to take, right? Or if you don't know like exactly what your route is, and you're like, well, my route might go as high as 5,000 feet, or it might go as high as 10,000 feet. That's like a very different scenario, right? For like what you might pack with you and what kind of shelter you might want. So I think nailing down at least as many of those kind of those early parameters as you can is the most helpful thing to do. And like I said, if you get later in the process and you're like this trip doesn't feel right, like as an example, imagine if you start doing you're like, hey, I want to go hike in Yellowstone National Park, or say Jasper. Is it Jasper Provincial Park or Jasper National Park? One or the other. Um, where there are grizzly bears in both areas. And then you start doing your environmental and route conditions assessment. You're like, oh man, there are grizzly bears, and I don't actually feel comfortable hiking in grizzly bear country by
Mm.
myself. And I don't have any friends who are capable of doing this particular itinerary. So maybe then I'll change the itinerary to make it more suitable for some friends to join me. Right. So like you're welcome to kind of go back and change things to make it work as you go along.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think one thing that people can kind of come into an issue with sometimes is just having that margin for mistake. And so, as you mentioned, sometimes like a route can be longer than it is, shorter than it is. You have to
Yeah.
pivot. So, how would you kind of plan and make sense for that margin for mistake? And how would you plan for changing conditions like that?
Yeah, that's a great question because that can be really hard. Like if you're a beginner backpacker, there are all of the like, well, what if, or just in case, like all of those scenarios that you don't have the experience to determine if they're valid or not. You're like, well, like, yeah, I mean, you could go down the rabbit hole with what ifs, like, right? Like, what if I fall into a river? You're like, and then so um, part of this process, this like these 7 steps I just described earlier, it helps you actually figure out what your actual risks are. So uh, like at the beginning, you might be like, okay, well, what if I fall into a river? What am I going to do? But then you start doing your environmental and route conditions assessment, and you get to the section on natural hazards, which would include like large bodies of water that you need to get across, and you discover in your research that all of the rivers that you need to cross are bridged.
Mm.
You're like, okay, well, I guess I don't need to worry about like what to do if I fall into a river because like that's just not going to happen. It's not a realistic risk. So one step to like all those margin to like that margin issue is like just trying to do the homework so that you can like understand like what your actual risks are. And then the second step too is just to the degree you feel like comfortable, like build in some of that margin. So if it's your first backpacking trip, yeah, like I don't know, maybe carry a little bit of extra food.
Hmm.
Maybe carry a little bit of extra stove fuel. Maybe maybe bring 2 different hiking shirts because you don't know exactly which one is going to be best for you. That's
Yeah.
fine, but with experience, you should be able to start cutting that margin closer and closer and closer to the point where you are very, very
Precise.
exposed. Yeah, very precise. Like you're not overextended, but you're like right at the edge. And it's funny. When I was thinking about, I knew I had this event this week. So when I was last week, I was on Netflix like late at night, and I saw this Alex Honnold climbing this skyscraper. And actually, I didn't
Crazy
watch the whole
video.
thing, but I saw him on Kimmel a couple like earlier this week, and he was saying that that the skyscraper was difficult enough to be interesting to him, but not so difficult that he couldn't do it like on live television. So he sort of like kind of knew that like he needed a little bit of extra margin to deal with the like having the pressure of like thousands of people watching him on the street below, or like coming up to a window, an office window, and like people taking photographs of him, and or like just kind of, or like knew that there was like going to be a helicopter around, and like he just kind of wanted an extra margin for that. So that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think he's also so confident in what he does. And that really ties into what you're talking about like taking that margin and getting it narrow and narrow and narrow and
Yeah.
getting more confident too. That kind of leads me into the next question I had for you. And it's really all around gear because with packing the right things, that comes with experience, but you also don't really know. It's like, okay, do I need to pack this? Do I not? And if you're hiking a lot and you're overpacking, that's an issue. But if you pack too lightly, you're kind of just out and exposed and there's nothing you could do about it. So how do you really decide what belongs on a trip and what doesn't, and what exactly are like, okay, I need to bring this, or just like things that you're like, let's think a little more about this?
Yeah, so people with experience, if you have a lot of experience, I mean, at this point, I've been backpacking for let's see, since I've been 22, so like half my life, like in a very serious way, like backpacking like pretty hard every year, and I kind of at this point know what I need and don't need. Um, if you're new to it, my recommendation would be that you find some start with like a really good gear list template, and I have one of those on my website too, and then start kind of filling it out and see how far that gets you. And then I would pitch out my gear list to an audience like say like Reddit Ultralight, which is a great online community. Nowadays, another thing you can do that works actually really well is use AI. Like upload your gear list to AI and say, "Hey, I'm going on a backpacking trip. It's 5 days long. It's going to be in Yosemite National Park.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's in July. I'm going with two other people. This will be my first real backpacking trip. Take a look at my gear list and tell me what you think." And I bet the AI could come back with some pretty decent information. Because remember, like AI, a lot of like AI's learning is based on communities like Reddit Ultralight. Like it's like
True.
pulling all that data or all that like knowledge, just scraping it off. So um, it stands to reason that the logic is pretty good too.
Yeah, I can imagine that. But okay, I actually have a bit of a controversial question for you.
Well, let's
But
let's hear it.
yeah, I want to hear your hot take, Andrew. Is there a piece of gear that you think people are currently really overhyping, or they're really obsessed with right now, but you don't actually think that it matters as much as they think?
Gosh, I don't. I tend not to chase the gear trends too much. Maybe the one thing that I like I kind of think is a little funny to me is how like in the weeds people get about pack fabrics, like backpack fabrics. Like there are all these new fabrics out there that I've never used, and um, like you read the long, long threads about which pack fabric is better than another. And I'm like, guys, like, 20 years ago, I went on an 11-month long trip with one backpack, uh, and the thing held together perfectly well. And it's basically as light as any pack fabric nowadays. Like, I think you're probably like over-examining it, like overthinking
Yes.
it.
Have trust in 22-year-old Andrew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And do you think that there's like a really common gear mistake that you see that even experienced hikers really have with this?
Not so much I mean, experienced backpackers shouldn't be making a lot of mistakes, right? By almost by definition. I think for the really experienced backpackers, and I would put myself in this category, is you actually get a little too like comfortable with your gear. So like when I go out nowadays, and I start to become a little self conscious about like how old some of my gear is because
If it
and you
works, it
like
works.
it works, but it doesn't look it doesn't look like I was on the Pacific Crest Trail last summer, right? Like
Mm.
and like I don't know, it's like have I don't have the look anymore. I think the big experience, I think the big mistake that beginner backpackers make, it's not even, and I think, but it's like, it's just, I know, is that a lot of them just pack fears. There's like, it's just a lot of like, well, what if, and just in case, and you just start throwing these things in your backpack for all these scenarios and contingencies that don't really exist and aren't really necessary. And that's how pack weights get completely out of hand.
Is that what you did when you were younger too? With your
Oh my
your
God. Yeah. I mean, I remember my first real backpacking trip. I did a little like warm up hike over spring break in summer or spring of 2022. But my first real backpacking trip was the Appalachian Trail through hike 2002. And yeah, I showed up to the
what a first
trailhead
hike.
at the southern terminus with like 50 pounds of stuff, none of which I actually needed. Like none of it was actually good. like I like I had a shelter, I had a sleeping bag, but neither was a good selection for where I was. I had rain gear, quote rain gear that was like water resistant but not waterproof. I think I had like three different pots with me, like cook pots, like a 1 liter, 1.5 liter, and a 2 liter. Like I don't know how many people
Full
I'm cooking
kitchen
for.
already.
Yeah, I was like I could have cooked for everyone at the campsite that night. So yeah, just a lot of I just didn't know. I just had a lot of junk. But
Yeah,
like I said, the information's a lot better. You shouldn't I kind of wonder when I see people out there nowadays who look like I did 20 years ago. I'm like, dude, have you not discovered the internet? Like there's so much good information online and like your followers today are taking advantage of like one little piece of that, but just like there's so much good information. So utilize it.
for the audience out there, if you travel with 3 pots, I guess Andrew is slightly disappointed in you.
Yeah, 3 pots probably too many. I mean, there are some circumstances where it may make sense, but yeah, pretty rare.
Yeah, we cut it off at 2 pots. So moving into my next question is about going on and off trail because you probably have done that a lot, especially with groups too. What are some mental shifts that people move from when they're going from following a trail to suddenly being confident when they're navigating off trail?
Yeah. So this is something that uh, traveling off trails like it's a higher skill level. So like not a lot of beginners. In fact, like almost no beginners. Probably not even a lot of intermediates. But it's something that keeps someone like myself engaged in backpacking. Still 20 years later, because I'll just be honest. Like I find trails to be. I'm sometimes happy to hike on trails, but like generally I find them to be like pretty like mind numbing. And like so when I'm off trail though, it's I can go wherever I want. It's like get into some really much more exciting things and just kind of feel like I'm a little bit more free. So navigation, it's one of the most critical backcountry skills, and it's certainly the one that's the most liberating. I think a good way to think about it is instead of you just being like a passenger on a prescribed backcountry experience, it allows you to be the driver. So because you can go wherever you want. And uh, I, the way that we teach navigation, let's see, how do we start this? So, um, as a navigator, you need a toolkit, and your toolkit consists of topographic maps, a magnetic compass, an altimeter watch, a timepiece, which can be one and the same, and a GPS. So, like, they're like 5 tools that you need. The next thing that you need to know is how to use each of those tools. So, like, can you look at a topographic map and like very easily determine whether a slope is going up or down? Can you find a high point? Can you find a low point? Can you find where you might find water? Um, more advanced skills would be can you tell me where there might be some game trails? Can you tell me whether a pass might go or whether it might be too steep? Can you tell me if this particular slope might be covered in talus or whether it's you know like something more pleasant than that? So that's would be examples of like how to read a topographic map. And you could do the same thing. There's like a skill set or knowledge set with each of those tools. So when you're using a compass, like do you know how to find a bearing in the field and transfer it to the map? Do you know how to find a bearing on the map and transfer it back to the field? Like, do you know how to do those things? And can you do it under pressure when like things aren't going your way? A lot of people nowadays, it's funny, like when the people who come on our trips now, a lot of them have actually like a uh, pretty good skill set when it comes to using a GPS, like a phone app, like a Caltopo or something, or a
Yeah.
Gaia. Um, they don't know how to like actually read paper maps and use any of the other devices because the phone just kind of does so much of it. Um, anyway, so you have this like knowledge about how to use each of your tools, and um, maybe a way to describe it would be a beginner backpacker can like with their credit card can buy all of the tools, and an intermediate backpacker will know how to use most of those tools, if not all of those tools. But the experienced backpacker, and this is like the key thing, is that they have this library of past observations about landscapes. So, for
Yeah.
example, uh, I can look at a map of, say, the Brooks Range in Alaska, where I've spent a lot of time, and I can probably tell you with pretty good accuracy, like whether or not the travel through a particular area will be good or bad. And that's just because I've been there. I've been in similar situations. I kind of know like the features to look for. And that like library of past observations makes off-trail travel much easier because it's pattern recognition. You're looking at a map of an area you've never been, and you're like, well, I haven't been here before, but I've been to some areas that are similar, and here's what happened. And then you can just like apply that past experience onto a new environment.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I was thinking about is you mentioned in the beginning that you do bring your paper map with you. And I think a paper map is so reliable because unlike a phone, your phone is just like it could break, like your battery can
Mm-hmm.
run out, but like reading a
Yeah.
paper map is it's always there. But I think skill of using a compass and like reading a paper map can get lost. So for the audience, like where would they be able to learn the skill, or what resources would you recommend that they check out to
Oh,
become great
how would they
compass?
learn how to use each of those?
Yes.
So there's a up on my website there's a checklist of like how to use like a skills checklist for navigation. And if someone were to like really wanted to learn, like they could print out that checklist and then just go into the backcountry. And or it doesn't even need to be in the backcountry. Like you could learn how to use your like how to use map and compass together in your neighborhood. You could print
Okay.
out a topographic map of your neighborhood. You could like start walking around your neighborhood and taking bearings, transferring them back and forth, and that would actually get like you could learn that. Yeah.
Yes, and
I
your
think for
neighbor.
most, I mean, there are a number of ways you can learn skills, right? Like you can do it, you can learn the hard way, doing it yourself. You can uh, read stuff online or watch videos online, and like those are pretty good. Some of them are pretty good. You can take courses. That would be another option. You could go backpacking with people who are better than you. That would be another option.
Yeah, or you could go with very experienced guides.
Yeah. Well, that would be the taking a course part. Yeah, and I think it just depends. It's a time and money thing for a lot of people, I think. So for me, like when I was in my 20s learning how to backpack, I had no money, lots of time. So I was willing to make every mistake imaginable. And like and I think when you learn your own mistakes, I think that like that's the best experience to have. But now at this point in my life, I'm not willing to put up with that. So I will like gladly pay someone to like help me save hours or days or weeks of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think this skill is definitely going to be a life-saving thing, especially when you're off trail and you're in the backcountry, which kind of leads me to ask, when you are off trail and something starts to feel wrong, what tells you that it's time to reroute? Or how would you kind of notice that something
Oh,
is
yeah, this is actually great. So this will like help tie in like this whole toolkit thing. So when we're teaching navigation, we will have our clients tell us their navigational story or their
Mhm.
navigator story, and the navigator story consists of past, present, future, like where you've been, where you are right now, and where you're going. And what we require is that is that they convince us of their story, like that they convince us that their story is correct about where they've been, where they are, and where they're going by using their tools. So, for example, um, uh, we leave the trailhead and we've been walking for an hour, like on like pretty easy trail, and we get to a trail junction and we're like, all right, everybody, like, where are we? And I'm just gonna, like, this isn't a real example, but someone might say, I think we're here and on the map. I'm like, all right, well, why is that? And they say, well, because it's a trail junction. It's the first trail junction we've encountered along this trail. But then when we look at the map a little bit more, we start reading the map and we realize that trail junction is only a half mile away from the trailhead, and we've been walking for an hour.
Ooh.
So what it would suggest, though, is that like your tool is telling you something else, right? Like the tool, like, so the time, for an hour, you're walking at like 2.5, 3 miles an hour. You're going to be more than a half mile away from the trailhead at that point. Okay, so to answer your specific question, when do you know like when to like call an audible? It's that when your tools are giving you data that is not supporting your navigator's story. So, like, as in another example, imagine, after that first stop, we keep going, and uh, at some point we take a compass bearing on the trail and we conclude that we're hiking southwest, in a southwesterly direction. And then we look at the trail a little bit more and we're like, all right, well, it looks like the trail is going to start climbing. It's going to cross a creek and then it's going to start climbing. And it's going to climb 1,000 vertical feet. And so we keep walking, we cross the creek, we start climbing, and the trail starts kind of feels like it is like topping out. And someone in the group is like, oh, yeah, I think we're at the top. And someone else, though, might say, like, well, my altimeter actually only says that we've climbed 700 feet from the creek crossing. In other words, like, we still have 300 feet to go, and what's actually happened is just a false summit. That like the trail is just kind of leveled out before it like picks back up again. So that
Mhm.
would be another example where like your data is telling you something a little inconsistent with your story. And sometimes it's really easy to figure out where you went wrong, like to figure out why your tool is telling you something different. And other times it's like, whoa, guys, let's time out. Let's all gather up. Let's really like figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of instances where people, like a group or someone, knows that they've made a mistake and they get like a little embarrassed or flustered by it, and they like want to like rush to go fix the mistake. In the thinking being, well, I don't want to like waste any more time on this mistake that I've made. But usually, what my experience there is that it's better just like take a few minutes, really make sure that your new story is correct before you just like start running around.
Yeah, because I think the last thing people want to be is like completely lost and then they run out of time and then
Mm-hmm.
daylight is cut short.
Yeah,
That becomes
yeah,
very dangerous.
yeah. There's a saying in our program. A couple of guides use it. They'll say, "There's always time for a snack." so, so like just as a reminder that like it's pretty rare, like outside of like someone's airway, someone's not breathing, or someone is like massively hemorrhaging their circulation, like ABC. Like if there aren't one of those things going on, like you almost always have time for a snack and just like sit down, relax, figure out your stuff.
Yeah, just keep going with clarity.
Yeah.
I think speaking of this, with just like learning how to reroute, how to plan, like making sure that when you're with a group, you know how to just kind of lead it and make the right decisions. You've obviously were a solo traveler first, a solo adventurer, and now you are a group leader. So, what do you think was one of the hardest lessons that you had to learn as you made that transition? What did that transition look like?
Yeah. It was not a natural transition. I think for anyone who's moving into like the trip leader role, either like professionally or just in whatever capacity you are in life, like maybe you have young kids, or maybe your friends who are less experienced backpackers than you've asked to like go out with you, you kind of end up taking on that responsibility. So a couple of things that I had to learn, and I didn't learn them quickly or necessarily easily. One was that When I'm leading a group, it's not my trip. So like I'm all like embarrassed to say almost, but like I remember early in my when I started guiding, if it had a little bit of an element where um, it was Andrew's trip and there were just people who happened to be along for the ride, and I just had to grow up and like just realize that if I'm in a trip leader capacity, then it's a role of service that like I am there to help and to facilitate the experience of others and like help make them have a really good time. And just I have, as the most experienced person in the group, typically I have a much greater bandwidth to do things for the group. So it's sort of like the role that I take on. So one is just adapting that role of service and realizing that the trip isn't it's not about you.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of makes me wonder, is it harder for you to manage terrain or manage people in these cases? And do you have like a funny story to share of a time where managing people was really tough in a trip
Yeah, like
situation?
I could give you an example, and like this is not like a highlight of my career. It's more like one of the like in hindsight one of like the low spots. This was
Right.
so 13 seasons ago now. We had a group of all men show up for a trip, and we do enough screening beforehand that we have a good sense of like of when they show up, kind of like what they'll be capable of doing. So in our internal communications, or actually external communications too, we would describe this group as like a median level fitness group. And a median is kind of like if you were like draw the bell curve, like most people who are on our trips are in this median, like at the highest, like the most number of people. Um, and like for that would be someone in uh, like someone my age in like their mid 40s. It's just like recreational fitness. So like I do a turkey trot for Thanksgiving. I maybe do like I go hiking over the weekends. I work out a couple of days a week, but I'm not an endurance athlete. But I'm also not like just like a full time desk jockey. Like I'm still kind of active. So that would be like your classic median level client. So this group shows up, and they kind of looks like we would expect, like as far as like ages and body types and that kind of thing. And we start hiking, and man, this group is hiking so fast. Like they're just like each guy would get to there'd be their turn to lead, and they would get up to the front of the group and they would hike as hard as they possibly could, and they would like drop the whole group, and everyone would be behind, breathing really heavy, charging up this hill. And my the other guy and I, we were in the back, and we looked at each other and we're like, gosh, like this group is like
The Amazing Race.
yeah, they're like way fitter than we realized. Let's ratchet up this itinerary. Let's really show them some stuff. So the first day went by. That's like okay. The group was pretty tired when they pulled into camp, but like everyone still pretty excited to be out there. Second day went by. Like you could just see bodies like starting to like kind of like hurt a little bit. By the third day, just people just fell apart. And
Oh
this one
no.
guy rolled into camp that night, and he comes over to the dinner group, and he comes into the group, and he throws his pot down on the ground, and the thing like clang, and it like rolls out of the camping area. And he just yells, he goes, next time we get to a trail, I'm hiking out of here. And at the time I remember being like, God, what a jerk. Like, who is this guy? Like, why is he like, what's the attitude all about? But in hindsight, like now I look back at it clearly, like as the group leader, I should have been the adult in the room. I should have like read that group and seen what was going on, which was a bunch of like basically a bunch of testosterone, a bunch of competitive guys beating each other up and like not working as a team and not taking like a 7-day approach to the trip. And so, nowadays, if that happens in a group, I will just get up front and I'll hike slow, and we'll like have nice conversations, and everyone will be much happier. So, yeah, it was a good lesson in how to manage a group. Again, at the time I thought it was him, and now I see that it was totally us. Yeah, it didn't have to go that way.
Yeah, I think that whole people management piece is so crucial, especially in situations like these that can potentially turn dangerous quite quickly. Um, So that kind of leads me to the next question that I have. And it's like, as a professional guide and having so much experience doing this, what's one habit or system that you start adopting first when you start to plan for a group like that? Or not like that, but just plan for a group in general, not knowing who exactly is going to show up.
Yeah, who's going to show up? Um, one of the things I always try to do in the first day is like start the trip in a way that can be very conversational. So like, yeah, we're all hiking together, but you kind of get strung out a little bit. You're at least in like a single file line typically, but I'll like keep the pace slow and I'll like make sure that can be really conversational. So like kind of allow people to get to know each other, like do the small talk thing, right? Like don't push people too hard because that's the other benefit of like having an easy first day is that people's packs are heavy. They might have traveled the day before, their body's not feeling quite right. If they were up really early, so like even like bathroom schedules get off. So like it's just can be kind of a tough day for people. And then it's also our shortest trip is 5 days, our longest trip is 11 days. And the 7 day trips, that's in between. So the 7 day trips and the 11 day trips, they're long trips. Like if you burn out a group on the first day, and then again on the second day, like you'll really struggle to finish strong. So I have always found on the first day that I've never regretted having like an easy first day, pulling into camp kind of early, like letting everyone get a good night's rest. Like seems to go really well. Many times I've regretted like on night one, pulling into camp at 6:30 and like trying to feed people dinner before it gets dark with stoves they've never used before and sleeping in shelters that they've never pitched. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that kind of group dynamic of getting everyone conversational sounds like it really helps them come together as a group and makes it kind of easier for the next even 11 days. 11 days is a
Yep.
long trip.
Yeah. And it can certainly help, right? Like not every
Yeah,
group is going to feel like family necessarily by the end. But uh, you need to give them the opportunity.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's a really cool insight. I also just wanted to thank you, Andrew, for the great conversation. I definitely really appreciate all the different takeaways that you've came in today with just how to plan a trip, even the gear, and like how to pivot and how to manage groups. But I also want to give our audience some time for you to answer some of their Q&A questions. So I hope everyone really enjoyed watching this and enjoying Andrew's takeaways. But now we're going to get into the questions that you have for Andrew. And I'm going to hand things over to Lauren, who's been keeping an eye on your questions in the Q&A box. And she'll take us through everything that you've left there.
Hey everyone. So I'm Lauren and I'm so excited to jump into your questions. Thank you all for sending in such thoughtful ones. We've got some good ones for you, Andrew. And of course, thank you again, Andrew, for being here with us today. So, the first question that came in was pretty early on. They were inquiring as to whether the 18 to 22 ounces of food per day was the weight for prepared food, or if that includes assumptions about dry or freeze-dried food as well.
Yeah, good question. So the recommendation is 18 to 22 ounces of dry food per day, and that assumes a caloric density of 125 calories an ounce. So if this is like calories per ounce, if that means nothing to you, let me give you a little bit of context. A pure carbohydrate or a pure protein has 100 calories per ounce, and a pure fat has 240 calories per ounce. So to get to 125 calories per ounce, you need to have like pure proteins and pure carbohydrates, and then you have to add some fat. So, and it's probably best to just have fattier food. So, for example, like Fritos and Pringles are both like 150, 160 calories per ounce. Almonds, cashews, any of the nuts are typically like around the same amount. Something like a macadamia nut is actually quite higher. It's like 180, 190 calories per ounce. For if you would like to add some calories to your dinners, an easy thing to do is to pack in olive oil with you because that's a pure fat, has 240 calories per ounce. Butter does not have as many calories in it per weight because it has water, but it's still heavier than pure carbohydrate, pure fat.
Cool. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and then let me since we're on that.
Yeah.
So if anyone's looking for a specific calorie number, especially for your Canadian audience who doesn't speak in imperial languages, 2,250 calories to 2,750 calories per day per person is the range. And that number it's time tested, trail tested, like a lot of people tested. The only time where I feel like it doesn't work is young, muscular people on hard trips, and especially if they're longer trips. And then at that point have to bump it up a little bit more.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've got some friends that they regularly consume close to 3,000 calories a day, and I don't even want to imagine what they would be putting away on a trip like some of the ones that you do.
Yeah, what is one of the funny things? Maybe one more thing. People's, I think early in a trip, particularly, your body doesn't adjust immediately to how many calories you're burning. So especially on like a short trip, like an overnight or like even a long weekend, by the time you're back to the trailhead before your like body really catches on. I think it's the longer trips, like the 5 days, 7 days, where you're like wow, I'm like hungry tonight. Like I'm really looking forward to dinner. So just like for your audience, just be prepared that on the shorter trips, like that real deep hunger doesn't quite kick in.
Yeah, you start to see it more when you're really testing your body for sure. Okay, so similarly, so this one came in precisely on the note of just in case. On multi-day trips where water sources are scarce, would it be preferable to hike up your total body weight with additional water, or to limit the length of the trip around the amount of water that you're comfortable carrying?
Wait, so what are the two options? What are they?
So hike up your total weight with additional water,
Yeah.
or limit the trip length around the amount of water that you're comfortable carrying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there is an upper limit, like just a practical limit of how much weight you could possibly carry. So yeah, I guess if you're going to be like in excess of that weight, like either a weight that you like physically can't carry anymore, or that you're like this, I'm not going to do a trip where I need to carry 70 pounds of water, even though I could. So I'm not really sure what like the right answer is. I guess it just depends on what you're willing to do.
Yeah, kind of like a know your limit and play within it situation.
Yeah, the furthest I've ever gone without water, I went. This is a long time ago now. I went 70 miles once without water, and I had to carry 35 pounds of water to start that stretch. And but I haven't had to do that in a really long time. I mean, the most nowadays is usually I have a little bit more control over like my itineraries because I'm not like necessarily usually following a route anymore. But I'll try to. I like to be able to camp at least near water. So if like I leave one water source in the morning, I will try to get to another campsite or to another water source by the end of the day.
Which is probably a safe bet to make too. And that also leads us perfectly into our next question as well. So when backpacking in the mountains and water sources are, kind of headwaters, do you purify your drinking water from those sources? And what consideration should one use for purification of drinking waters in mountainous backcountry?
When I'm close to headwaters, especially in more pristine like backcountry areas, I will often not purify it. To each their own. It's a calculated risk. So when I look at a water source, I'm thinking about distance from source. So like, all right, where did this water originate? Is it 10 feet up the hill in a snowbank or a snowfield, or is it like a mile up the valley? And then like, all right, and then what's the color? What's the temperature? Is there any kind of smell to it? because those would be a function of like, obviously, like clear water, colder water, water that doesn't have a smell is all like better water typically. The other big thing would be like, well, what's upstream of this water source? So are there herds of animals like elk or caribou? Are there like beavers, which would be a bigger thing? Are there people? Are there cattle or livestock? So it's a little bit of a calculated risk, but in a lot of the areas where I backpack, especially here in the Rockies or in the Sierra, the water is pretty awesome. So I will often not purify it.
All right, perfect. Okay, so one kind of regarding navigation. I know you mentioned early on in our session that you're still very much a paper map guy, but they had inquired as to how much you rely on those paper/analog methods versus electronic navigation devices.
I think my paper map is still my primary navigational tool. So when I'm on my own personal backpacking trip, I'm using my phone, like my phone GPS, as like it's like a distant second resource. Like I don't it a paper map. Big advantages: doesn't need batteries. Um, the scale doesn't change. So like how when you're like on your phone and you're like zooming in and out, the scale is changing. So it's like kind of changing your like understanding of the landscape. It's also let me grab the map.
This was the live demo that no one was expecting today, guys. You're in luck.
Another big advantage of a paper map, the map sizes that we like to use are about this big. Like in comparison, like look at the amount of information that this paper map has over a phone. So I think the best, someone once said, reading a map on a phone is like looking through a straw. That's kind of how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So I try to use the paper map as much as I possibly can. Really, again, the only time I'm really pulling out the GPS is, I'd say the biggest thing is like precision. So if I need to like, if I'm in say southern Utah where that's this it's very like it's a sedimentary landscape, and usually there are limited ways up and down through the sedimentary layers. So there's like a little gully, at this particular coordinate, and it's 3 feet wide, and if you are 10 feet to the right, you're not going to find it, or you're not going to you can't get down over there. So I might use it to like if I'm looking for that level of precision. And the other instance I'll use it is if I need to do like not heavy duty, but just like calculations for distance or for vertical that I could do on the map, but that would take me a lot longer. So for example, like if I'm at lunch and I'm like, hey, like how far is it to where we're planning on camping tonight? It's so easy just to like pull up the phone and go tap, 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 tap. And it tells me the distance, tells me the vertical, like done, as opposed to like sitting here on my map and going, okay, well, we're right here. And the first climb is, 300 vertical feet. And then we go down 200 vertical feet. And then we go up 600 vertical feet. Annoying. Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of help you sanity check what you might already know.
What I could do. Yeah. It's just it's the processing power.
Okay. So it looks like we had one last one regarding emergency food. So we'll circle back there. How much emergency food should you bring? And now that you can be reached faster than before, I'm assuming they meant kind of with the availability of satellite devices. Mm-hmm. Is it less important now, the amount of emergency food that you bring?
I don't typically carry like emergency food. I don't remember the last trip that I was on where I didn't get out within a couple of hours of when I had anticipated. So, but that's me, like a beginner backpacker. Like I get it. Like pack some margin, but
yeah. Make sure that you have that room for error just in case, especially if you're new to the sport. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So this one was, I get that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But what is your plan/thought process when something goes critically wrong? And the example they gave was a medical situation or recognizing that you become hypothermic.
So usually significant issues like that, you probably have already made some mistakes to get there. So like I'm always wary a little bit of like what if? Because I would say like, well, like, what's the first, how did the person become hypothermic? Like, is it because they didn't have the right gear? That should have been solved in the planning process, right? Or is it because they, continue to stay on the trail and go higher despite it getting like the rain and getting colder and heavier? But to answer the question, because that's what they're asking for, I with the satellite technology that we have nowadays, it's kind of irresponsible not to have something. So like a ZOLEO I've been using a ZOLEO for a long time. Having something available to you to call out for help can be pretty helpful if you really end up in a pickle.
Exactly, and it's a common thing. You don't want to ever have to use it, but you're glad you have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've had to use mine for some emergencies, and sometimes like to call for like some legit help. Like, hey, I have a client with me experiencing these signs and symptoms. Like they're non-ambulatory. Like, what can you do for me? What can you do for me?
Yep.
And I've also had the like, where I've been able to communicate with my like office support saying like, hey, I've got this client who's having these symptoms. Like, can you just, I think it might be this, or I think it might be that. Could you poke around the internet a little bit and kind of tell me what you're seeing with a little bit more connectivity and medical information?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. So I think we have time for one more quick one. What is your go-to for shelter and sleeping arrangements?
So I've got to the point where I backpack in 4 distinct environments every year. So I start off in the desert, like southwestern canyons, and then I move to the Brooks Range in Alaska, which is like kind of wet, like maritime Arctic. And then I go to the High Sierra in California, which is like alpine desert almost. So the equipment that I use, I like to be able to just use one shelter, one sleep system for the whole year. Just kind of keeps things simple. So the last couple seasons, I have been using the Hyperlite Mountain Gear Mid 1, which is a fully enclosed single wall pyramid shaped shelter. It weighs like 16 ounces, which is just ridiculous. And then for a sleeping bag, I have been using an Enlightened equipment, a quilt. The quality of which is excellent. Like the down is excellent. The shell fabrics are excellent. But I gotta be honest, I'm like just getting tired of drafty quilts, and I think I'll be moving to a mummy bag sometime soon.
You heard it here first, folks.
But they're tough to the price tags are tough to stomach. They're expensive. I once tried those.
That they are. All right, folks. So that is all we have time for today for question and answers. If you had submitted a question that we didn't get to, don't worry. We'll be sending out a post-event recording, and we will do our best to address any of the remaining questions there. Thank you again for being with us today, and I'm going to pass it over to Sammy just for a few closing remarks.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of ZOLEO Campfire Chats. It's been great having you all here today, and a huge, huge thank you to Andrew for sharing his experience and insights with us today. We can't wait to see you at the next Campfire Chats. But until then, stay safe, stay connected, and happy adventuring. And also check out andrewskurka.com. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Lauren.